Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And with this one, I am bringing you my patch 9.2 Boomkin PvP guide. I'm going to be running down basically everything you need to know for the Balanced Druid, covering the strengths and the weaknesses, the talents, the covenants, the compositions, the options, the strategy, and the gameplay as well, so that you can get the most success out of your Balanced Druid. Although Balanced Druid is not necessarily the most competitive option right now, it's definitely not on the S tier specialization. I'm actually having the most fun with the specialization that I have had throughout this entire expansion, and I'll be covering the specific builds that I use to have my success. I've already managed to get the Gladiator achievement, playing at 26 to 2700 MMR with a variety of compositions. So I have an expansive knowledge, having gotten rank 1 on it throughout this entire expansion on the specialization as well. So without further ado, let's get started. Balanced Druid, you're going to have to make a pretty big choice up front, and this choice is going to be for your covenants. Specifically, I've been enjoying the Necrolord Covenant the most. However, this is not the best option in all cases. If you are going to run with a Necrolord Balanced Druid, you will want to be pairing yourself up with a Warlock or a Mage. This is so that your sustained damage is going to be coming with the most benefit. You also get some extra survivability out of it with Adaptive Swarm Healing and Fleshcraft, which can be very useful against compositions like Rogue Mage particularly, which Balanced Druid really struggles at the moment. I think that it is a bit easier to play than the Kyrian option, whereas you're just focused on always maximizing your damage rather than trying to find these targeted windows of specific burst. So if you're looking for an old school vibe of Balanced Druid with Starfall and Dots, this is going to be the build, and I'm just going to be explaining to you what I do inside of it. We'll start with the Covenant and we'll start with the conduits here. I'm going to have to hide my camera to do this because it just gets cut off on the video here. But first of all, I'm pretty much always running Bonesmith Hirmir here. And the advantages to running Bonesmith is specifically the Hirmir's Arsenal, Marrow Gemstone, which is after landing 10 critical strikes, you gain 18% increased critical chance to strike for 10 seconds, and this occurs every 60 seconds. This gives you a very big spike and increase on your overall damage with your Starfall ticking and all of your dots ticking on multiple targets, and it's very useful for your overall damage output, and I really enjoy running this option. Just because of this conduit. You'll gain other benefits like the Forgeborn Reveries, which just gives you flat amount of stats, which again is great for sustained damage. Also, I have actually won a few games from coming back to the dead as a ghost and then Solar Beam a healer, and then my allies are able to kill enemy targets. So it can actually sometimes come in pretty clutch at the end of games. I choose then to run the Evolved Swarm, which is just going to increase periodic effects from your Adaptive Swarm, really important for this damage over time effect build. You're just going to passively get this. It's not a big deal. Tireless Pursuit is the best finesse conduit. It just gives you more movement speed while shapeshifting around the map, and your mobility is very important right now to avoid damage. It's not like it used to be for Balanced Druid where you just stood still in bear form. You will die if you are not moving almost at all times, and this is going to help you greatly with that. The next most powerful endurance conduit is the Well-Honed Instincts, which is when you dip below 40% health, you're going to get an auto cast of Frenzied Regen. This can backfire against things like mind games, so you may want to create a macro to cancel aura your Frenzied Regeneration when you know that you're getting mind games on an assault, so that it doesn't heal into the mind games and end up killing you. Next, we're going to run the Innate Resolve Endurance Conduit, which is just further going to increase the healing from our Frenzied Regeneration, as well as our regrowth. And this is going to chain into the conduit, that slot that I specifically target this tier 4, which is the Marrow Gemstone for the 18% critical strike. I then go to Fury of the Skies, which is Moonfire increases your arcane damage to the target, and Sunfire increases the nature damage to the target by 2.2%, again, to just try and focus on all of our dots doing more damage and focusing around dot uptime. Next, we move on to the Carver's Eyes. Damaging an enemy above 90% health grants you 136 mastery for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks, and you cannot gain the benefit from this target for 10 seconds, but extra mastery stacking for more damage overall. And then finally, the last endurance slot being in Ursine Vigor. For 4 seconds after shifting into bear form, your health and armor are increased by 26.4%. Again, very important for pre-bear forming stun locks on you against melee cleaves and to reduce damage in general. The endurance conduits bring some of the highest value for for Balanced Druid, and this tier lets you select 3 of them, so it's going to allow you to be more tanky. And then finally, the mnemonic equipment, which is just dealing extra damage when targets are low, and it really doesn't actually do very much overall, and you don't really have to think about it because it's just automatically selected at the bottom, but you're not going to really have to worry about it because you're not going to have to think about it. Now that we're done with looking at the conduits, we can start to look specifically at the gear. And for the Necrolord, obviously, you're going to want to run your 4-piece bonus. Figuring out what slot of gear to put your legendaries on and what slot to put your other gear on can be really challenging. So right now, my given circumstance is that I'm just kind of wearing the free belt because I haven't gotten my best in slot gear yet on the ladder, because again, we're kind of time gating on unlocking our gear. So I would recommend, unless you have these slots already unlocked, to just kind of keep the belt going around for free and save yourself some gold. You will want to craft, however, Circle of Life and Death onto your ring. This is going to again focus on your damage over time effects and maximize their damage output, and synergizes really nicely with your set bonuses. Right now I'm wearing the set bonuses from my pants simply because the game has given that to me, but I would not. What will happen is once I can craft my tier gloves, I will move the Unity legendary to my pants. And then I have to put a normal PvP belt on. This way, I'm wearing a legendary on a high main stat piece of gear. This is like your chest, your helmet, or your legs. But my legs have the worst stats out of all of the tier pieces. My helmet has versatility. My chest piece has versatility and haste. And this has haste on it, which I'm prioritizing more than the crit from this one. I'd rather have lower crit and higher haste to, again, focus on keeping my dots up as much as possible, getting more global cooldowns. I enjoy haste more, specifically with this build. And then I would move Unity here onto my pants, and again I have to buy the PvP gloves and belt when that time occurs. But the Unity legendary is going to allow Adaptive Swarm to have a chance to split, and when this thing can actually get rolling and you have it on multiple enemy targets, it does become very powerful and provides nice purge protection for your team, for survivability, which is another reason why I'm actually starting to lean towards the Necrolord more often than not. But if you are going to play with burst damage classes, things like Elemental Shamans, even Demon Hunters to a degree, Windwalker Monks, I would recommend running Kyrian, but you could maybe make this work. I think that this is still the most fun option for Balanced Druid. I think that I could achieve even more with it. It depends on what you're doing. If you're running with a Necrolord Ellie that's sustained damage, you might be able to make this work, and that's what you're basically trying to do with the Balanced Druid. Is Kyrian is set up burst damage. You want to play that with setup burst damage specialization partners. If you're playing with sustained damage oriented partners, Necrolord is going to be a really good option. You can run Convoke the Spirits in either one, but you might have more frustration with it. It's not that bad, but again, it's easy to stop. There's a lot of classes with pets, and it doesn't provide you as much of a defensive bonus as the Kyrian Vial to remove bleeds for Assassination Rogues, or the Fleshcraft to absorb damage from Assassination Rogues, and specifically Assassination Rogues that are going to give you a lot of trouble. As far as that for customizing your gear, you just want to focus on having haste and versatility on as many pieces as you can. And also, I've grabbed the crafted ring, specifically with more haste and verse, to get speed on it. This 82 speed also works in arena. So again, movement speed, very important for the Balanced Druid, so that you can run away and get away from your enemies. You're going to be kiting a lot as this spec. I will often flex my trinket here. I will tend to run the Insignity of Alacrity against basically anything that's not double, it doesn't have a Fire Mage or double Spellcaster. I will pretty much run this in all of those instances, but when it's double Spellcaster or Fire Mage, I will then put on my Cosmic Gladiator's Eternal Aegis, and this is just, again, to absorb magic damage. Really effective to trade with things like Combust, and, well, not even that it's effective, it's that it's basically mandatory. I am considering changing this for Battlemaster when I get the upgraded one, but if you don't have the upgraded Battlemaster, then the Cosmic Eternal Aegis will do as a substitute, because you can get it already immediately at such a high item level for free, basically, from that quest. Sometimes you can play Medallion in all situations if you want to, but against Resto Shaman Melee Cleave, so Resto Shaman Warrior Ret, Resto Shaman Windwalker DK, this type of stuff, you can sometimes get away with running, I would actually maybe not into Windwalkers because they can root off this trinket. Resto Shaman Melee Cleaves that don't have Windwalkers, you can run the Cosmic Gladiator's Echoing Resolve, which is just going to make crowd control longer, but then you go immune. So if you get wind sheared by one interrupt, you're then immune to the Mind Freeze afterwards, or the Storm Bolt afterwards, and that chain of interrupts that can happen to you as a Balanced Druid, you can break that chain up. But against Windwalker, I wouldn't recommend it because they can just root it off of you and then stun you, leg sweep you for 10 seconds and one-shot you. So don't run this trinket into Windwalker monks. But Resto Shaman Melee Cleave with anything other than a Windwalker monk, I think that this is actually a good trinket to kind of flip between. So you will want to kind of take that into account. And you can wear the Aegis into everything, but I think getting the extra haste and damage from this, when you know either you're not the target, or you know that there's no magic damage on the other team, it's probably a better to run this proc trinket and really maximize your damage. Now moving on to the talents. The first row of talents is auto locked in as Nature's Balance. It's just going to provide you to start the fight with a Starfall and just generate astral power while you're running around the map, or if you're getting stunned, which is really good. And it's not going to take up global cooldowns to start generating you a resource. I play Wild Charge in almost all situations. I think the only time where you would want to substitute out Wild Charge would be Renewal for Rogue Mage specifically. And this is kind of like your, oh no, I got Mind Games, I'm going to die button. So you can press your Aegis or Battlemaster, Renewal, and Hellstone if you got that all at the same time. And it will just kind of heal through the Mind Games and really pick you up in a hurry. So you can run it there. But pretty much everything else, especially melee cleaves or caster cleaves, I'm running Wild Charge to be able to reposition around the map, because avoiding damage is really important. I really like the bear form for being able to charge in and root targets to prevent them from chasing my allies as well, or hold them in place for a solar beam or something like that. I really like the utility of it. But again, Renewal as an, oh no, this is a really bad situation button is really good against Rogue Mage specifically. You're almost always going to be running Guardian Affinity, having Incapacitating Roar for appeal on your team, having access to Frenzied Regeneration for self-sustain, and just taking 6% less damage because you take so much damage is basically mandatory for you as a balanced druid. And then here onto the next row, we've got Mighty Bash and Mass Entanglement. These are kind of the two that are always in contention. When it's Resto Druid, your Mighty Bash. I've often tempted to run Mighty Bash in a lot of cases against these Holy Priest teams, because most of them are Night Fae, which means they can blink out of your solar beam every second solar beam. First and third they can blink out of. So your Mass Entanglement ends up getting not a lot of value. And against Holy Priest, what I'll usually end up doing is bashing them and solar beaming on top of it and swapping to them and trying to kill them in it, because they can't use their defensive cooldowns when they're silenced, and the stun holds them inside of the silence. And I've been getting a bit more value out of running this specific build. Also, a lot of the times the priests are playing with specializations that can get them out of roots as well. Ret Paladins, Windwalkers, or Hunters that can get them out of the root where you're not getting a lot of value. Mass Entanglement can still bring some value defensively against pet classes like BM Hunter to root pets, or Windwalker monks to root their images. So if there's like a defensive option there that you want to run this, or you're playing with a class that has a lot of stuns, you can choose to run the Mass Entanglement for its peeling effects. You can sometimes run Deep Roots, which will work with the Mass Entanglements to be able to kind of beam a healer and hold them in place while they're just dying to dots, which can be really effective to take that into account. But I've been really liking the Bash beam swap to healers lately. Unless I'm running a setup-based comp. But with Necrolord specifically, you're kind of focusing on doing as much damage as possible. I run Starlord in every situation. I think just having access to a stacking extra stat is really good, especially with trying to maintain your dots with that circle of life and death. Means that they'll be falling off very quickly, which means you have to refresh them before they're falling off to maintain their uptime. I've opted to run Stellar Drift specifically with this build, but if you were to run Kyrian, you would be wanting to run Twin Moons, and Stellar Drift just gives Starfall a massive boost in damage, so you're getting extra value out of pressing it, and it lets you move cast, which can be really good with your 4-step bonus to activate your Eclipse, because you want to be dumping your Star Surges only when in Eclipse, so you can move cast your Starfires while running away, move cast your Star Wraths while running away to activate into Eclipse, and then kind of dump the rest of your Astral Power from there. So really nice additional benefits towards this build specifically. And I've tended more often than not to run Solstice, which is just shooting stars is going to trigger way more often. So all your dots should be on the targets at all times. You activate Eclipse. That's going to give you the biggest ramp of burst, because that's when you want to spend all your Astral Power. And it's going to give you this little bit of added damage during that kind of burst AoE moment, which you're going to really feel during that time. And doesn't take a global cooldown away from you like Fury of Elune would. Also, it's a little bit more invisible. Usually, some enemy players will see Fury of Elune on the ground and then just immediately be like, oh, the Boomkin's pressing damage, and try and trade something. This damage is a little bit more sneaky and can come through and be more invisible. If you're going to run Kyrian Balanced Trade, you would run Fury of Elune. Here on the Honor Talents, this is kind of the default that you can get away with playing a lot of the times. High Winds, Moonkin Aura, Alkin Adept. Alkin Adept is mandatory. This is the only way you're going to really be able to survive if you're getting attacked, is because it's going to make your cyclones faster and you can get enemies off of you, because if you don't, you are going to die. Boomkin Aura is really good if you're playing with other spellcasters that benefit from spell critical strike, but if you're not, you can change this talent around. Again, like if you want to run those entangling roots, mass entangle, deep roots builds, you can run that specifically, or you can swap it out for thorns for extra single target damage. I tend to just keep Boomkin Aura in as a baseline, again, because I just like the flat stat value from it, along with things like Starlord. And then High Winds is usually the one that I am kind of flipping around in my build specifically. So against rogues, I will switch High Winds out for Fairy Swarm. This is so that when you see the rogue stun locking a target, you can disarm them right before they go for a restun, and then your ally can escape the crowd control chain, and it's really effective for that. Or if I'm fighting double melee DPS, actually specifically as Necrolord, if you wanted to run maximum damage, actually, you would be running Starburst here with Boomkin Aura Alkin Adept. This would give you the highest amount of damage. I actually do recommend you play Starburst with this and maybe drop Boomkin Aura if you have to pick up Fairy Swarm for disarm, just because this will provide you a lot of damage, and because Starfall is up the whole game, or should be up pretty much the whole game as this build, you're going to be getting a lot of these stars on the ground, and you'll see that in the clip that I cover of the gameplay here in just a moment. You can sometimes flip out Disarm for Protector of the Grove. This is kind of where your like utility wing comes in. I like Disarm for rogues, I like Thorns for double melee, and I like Protector of the Grove for pretty much everything else, to just provide some extra off heals if I know my healer is going to get swapped to. But High Winds is not necessarily a bad default. It's just if you want maximum damage, make sure you've got Starburst locked into this option. And I think that's pretty much it for Covenant talents, equipment, gear covering. So we could just jump right into the clip that I've got here. And in this video, I'm playing with a Frost Mage. This would be like one of my #1 recommended specializations to play with. You're going to be really powerful into melee cleaves. You will struggle against things like Rogue Mage. I'm curious to try this build out with other classes though, something maybe with the Death Knight. I've been having a lot of fun actually recently with the Death Knight. And a Warlock specifically, but we'll just jump into this clip right away. My main goal, again, is keep dots on everything, keep them away from my mage. So I'm going to Typhoon the Hunter, dot up the Priest, make sure that all those are out. I want to activate my Eclipse, so I'm going to cast Wrath twice, then I'm going to Starfall with a discount, Star Surge at the healer, and drop my Adaptive Swarm on the healer to maximize the dot damage onto the healer, so there's spread pressure going across the board. Then look back towards the DPS if the healer runs away. Going to use Bash here as a peel while my healer is in a stun. Going to Cyclone the Feral while my healer is in a trap, and then I'm going to off heal whoever is getting attacked. I use Thorns onto my mage as well during this time, because they either have to attack into Thorns or not do damage to the target they want to hit. My Starfall is calling in the Starburst on the ground. You can see these blue balls. We're going to pick those up, run those into targets, activate our Eclipse while running those balls into as many targets as we can, and keeping our Adaptive Swarm on the Feral or the Priest, because Hunters can feign death it off. You don't want to do that. Ferals ran away. Hunter's still in our line. Hunter used his turtle. Can't hit the Hunter. We're going to swap to the Priest. Solar Beam the heal. Keep dumping out as many casts as we can. Star Surge with Eclipse, and just completely one-tap the Priest, going from one target to the next to the next. With this composition specifically, you want to be focusing on maximizing your ramp and not pulling back too much on defense. So like just trading cooldowns to stay aggressive and keep getting your damage out during your window. And you can see on the scoreboard, like I did an insane amount of damage overall. I was doing almost 10k DPS, including damage to pets, and was doubling the scoreboard of everybody else. So when you can really maximize this build, Thorns is really good with it. Starburst is really good with it, because the legendary scaling your damage over time effects, if they attack into Thorns with that Circle of Life and Death, they're taking even more damage. If they have Adaptive Swarm on them with that, they're taking even more damage. And you can really overwhelm an enemy team like this. So if you're looking for a build that's going to get you like a lot of rating really quick, this is a composition and a build that will do that for you. You'll start to struggle when you get against some of the best rogue mages in the game. But if you're trying to push just to even Gladiator at this point, I think that this is a really good comp. It's a nice one to just stomp all these melee cleaves that you might be struggling with that have Demon Hunters and Death Knights and things like that. So would definitely be my recommended. I often also run Elemental Shaman balanced through it as well. I've been playing with a lot of specs. If you want to watch that live, twitch.tv/Supatease, and you can follow me there. But that is pretty much it for me here in this video for my balance theory guide. Just wanted to cover the conduits I'm running, talents, my thoughts on the spec, and compositions that you can take and run for yourself and enjoy. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with all patch changes and news and updates that happen in World of Warcraft, so that you're ahead of the competition, not missing a beat, and you don't have to sift through the internet to figure out if your spec got nerfed into the abyss. Other than that, once again, thank you, and I will catch you in the next video.